Hello, everybody, and welcome to
Hey,
today's
folks.
Ignition Community Live. My name is Travis Cox,
And my name is Kevin McCluskey.
and we're happy to be with you guys here today. So for those of you who don't know us, we're the co-directors of sales engineering here in Inductive Automation, and we're going to take you through on the topic of Ignition Perspective. We're going to focus on this new module that we released last year in April. I can't believe it's been a year already, Kevin.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so with this, we're going to show you the power and the versatility and the flexibility of the Perspective module and some of the cool things you can do with it. We're going to show you a demo project so you can see some of the features in action. We're going to show how to build a project using Perspective from scratch so you can see how easy it is to build web applications and deploy them. We're going to talk about some of the cool features that are in there. We're going to look at the Exchange here today. And we're also going to show how you can put Perspective in parallel with existing systems. So we've got a kind of a jam-packed day planned here, but we're going to start with just a couple of slides here to first make sure everybody understands what Perspective is, and then go through some of the fun features there. All right, so Ignition Perspective. It is, for me, I'm like a kid in a candy store with this product. It's a lot of fun to work with. It is the native HTML5 and CSS visualization. So we can, really put the plant floor in your pocket and utilize mobile devices like phones and tablets so much easier. We can get data to more people because all we need is a modern browser to do that. So we can use any browser that's out there. And that could be on a PC, could be on a panel PC, could be on a touchscreen computer, on a phone or a tablet, could be on a smart TV, and heck, could even be on a refrigerator. We actually got a new refrigerator, and it has a modern browser in it, and I was able to open up, my home automation system, which is written in Perspective on that, which was pretty cool to see. The idea of Perspective is to be able to easily build web applications. And the way you design is very similar to how we've done things in Vision. It's very drag and drop designer, easy and simple deployment to get that out there so people can look at it. But it's not compromising on how powerful it is and the security it's built into Perspective. It's got a lot of powerful components, which we'll see a lot of those here today, and we're continuing to build on more components as we go along. It's also built to be mobile responsive so that it's optimized for whichever medium you happen to be looking at it on. So if I'm on a desktop, you can get the full kind of display of what you're looking at. If you see on the image over here on the right, you see what an example HMI would look like on a desktop, and then what it would be optimized to look like on a phone. So this is an inherent part of the Perspective, to be able to build screens this way. It also has theming and styling built in Perspective. We're going to show some of the styling today, and it's really riding off CSS and allows us to define how our look and feel and how our application looks in one place. And we'll show some more of that. But it's got a very powerful binding and Python scripting integrated with that, which allows you to really build any kind of application because of that. And whether it fits into HMI Skater, whether it fits into a database front end or just visualization and dashboarding, really any application, the sky's the limit with Perspective. Not only that, because it's perfect for mobility, we also have native apps for iOS and Android, which we're going to show off here today, that allow us to harness the phone sensors, GPS, camera, accelerometer, and a lot more hopefully in the future as well. I think we added Bluetooth support as well. So a lot of cool things that we can do and extend our application down to that phone. And then throughout all of this is built-in security. It is a native part of Perspective from the very foundation. We built it to be with security in mind there. So I don't know, Kevin, anything you want to add to any of that?
Well, I think you covered it pretty well. We're about to show a little bit of how this is working, and part of what we're excited about with these Ignition Community Live sessions is that we're able to just kind of go wherever we want to go. And so we have the ability to do a quick overview, like Travis is doing, and we have the ability to do a deep dive into these things as well. And we can also let the questions guide us a bit in terms of the things that we show. So we know we're going to show the style customizer, and we know that we're going to show transforms and some of the other cool features that are inside Perspective. that make it nice from a development standpoint. And we're also going to show how easy it is to just get up and get started and drag things out and get going. So we can often show things that are part of the answers to the questions too. So don't be shy.
Absolutely. All right, so that's kind of an overview of perspective and sort of what we're going to look at here today and go into some of these features, like Kevin said, in more detail. But I wanted to talk real quick about security. I mentioned how we have security built into Perspective. It's a native part of it. I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on that because I think it's a really important part of using Perspective, because people are going to be able to bring data to the business side, if you will, bridge the gap between OT and IT so that we can have data accessible on both sides. We might be putting that information into the cloud. In fact, today we're actually going to show an example of that, where we could put Perspective in the cloud. And you have to, if you understand how the security is built in, you'll have a much better feeling about being able to leverage it in those ways. So Perspective from the very beginning, supports industry-leading encryption protocols. Because it's a web application, we're riding on tried and true security practices that are out there. We're also compatible with federated identity providers. So these allow us to use your company's identity providers that have single sign-on multi-factor authentication, so that you can have that extension that extended out to all of your applications. So you might already have something like this in place, Okta or Duo or Microsoft ADFS, and there are many others where I can log into one area. I can have a portal where I can go to any application, and I can just by signing in once, I have all my applications accessible, and having the ability to support two-factor authentication to further identify who that person is through that second form becomes really important for a lot of applications. And our permissions models really lets you secure your apps that you build in Perspective very easily. And again, we can show a little bit more of that here today. But a good diagram to look at, just to give you a sense of really how it's constructed behind the scenes, is this one here. This really shows the underpinnings of Perspective. It gets a little bit more technical, but I think it's worth looking at. As you know, if you're going to using your browser, so whether it's Chrome, Firefox, Safari, you're going to have the browser, and you're going to navigate to the URL, which is the IP address of the host name of that server, and you're going to access the application. And when you do that, of course, your application is running in the browser there. And that's where your session is. And so on the server, though, we are communicating back to that server. And if you look here, all the communications happening over just these two areas. It's very, very simple, and it's going through a TLS, secure tunnel, so that there's encryption there. Nobody can see what's happening between the two. And on the server side, when you establish that session, when you log into the application, of course, you might be doing that through federated identity, where we know who you are, we know what roles, security levels you have associated with you, and we're going to be building out. So if I'm looking at a particular view, that view will be represented over here on the server in that session, and we'll have that entire hierarchy available to us. And behind the scenes, there are things that your view wants to look at. You might want to bind it to tags, or you might want to get data from databases, or from the gateway network, or from the operating system. There might be things you want to access there from your session. But what's going to happen is all that's going to be behind a protected layer. And so once we've identified who that person is and what roles and groups they have associated with them, then all we're doing is that entire view is represented here, all the properties, and that is being synchronized. There's properties that are being synchronized between the browser session and the server. And so if I were to change, if the tag changes, that value will get pushed up and synchronized with the browser, so we can see that change on the screen. And if I were to write to a tag there by changing, let's say, a toggle switch, that's going to get synced over here to the server, and then it's not going to actually be written to the tag until it goes through that security level to verify that the person that's on that side who established the session is allowed to do it. So it's very, very safe. By having this synchronization between these properties, the same session lives on both sides, and we can guarantee there's no way a command can be written down to say, go do this. It's all through these properties. And then, of course, further, we have the ability to handle events. So you might want to handle an on-click event, or your mouse hovers something. when these events occur in the browser, the server wants to be notified so it can act on that, whether it's going to run a script or if it's going to do some other kind of action on there. So these are the only two areas that of the interaction between the browser session and the server, which is those properties and those events. And behind the scenes, we have this full, secure layer that guarantees that, the browser session can't ever, do something harmful by sending just some arbitrary command, or if there's some man-in-the-middle type of attack, it's not going to happen here. So from the very beginning, perspective was built this way, and you're writing on TLS there or HTTPS, in your session, you see that security, that it's trusted, and you know sort of how this works really behind the scenes. Kevin, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah. So if you're new to Perspective, one thing, and if you're new to Ignition and some of these technologies overall, one of the nice things about all of this is you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to care about it. We built the security in so that it's automatic behind the scenes, and you're not configuring any of this. This just happens for you. So you open up a session, a client inside the browser, and you take a look at things, and all of these security measures are employed and in place already, even before you're doing anything with Perspective, and you didn't really need to set those things up. The one exception would be, we do always recommend enabling TLS, SSL, doing the encryption. And we do have a security hardening guide that has that type of information inside it that walks you through that. Our user manual has information on all that too. But yeah, everything that we have built in for security is built into the platform, and you don't have to specifically set these things up. One thing that I wanted to jump over to, we had one question come in, which is it possible to make notifications from Perspective when the phone is logged? When the phone is locked, I think you meant. That is a very good question. So we're talking about push notifications. So basically, iOS and Android have those apps have the ability to send something over. It shows up inside the notifications for both of those. With Perspective, we want to get there. We do not have that built in as of right now. We do have some folks who are doing that with some of their apps and using Ignition to push to their apps. Twilio has a delivery notification. We have a Twilio module that you can tie into. But the quick answer is, as of right now, no, we don't have something that's native inside Ignition for those push notifications. But that is definitely on our radar. A second question that just came in, actually, is what are optimal, quote, breakpoints for typical, quote, better end phones currently available? No, I think that'll be something that's really interesting to show here in a little bit. So I think once we have the designer open, we can talk a little bit about that. We can talk about viewport resolutions, and we can talk about which breakpoints work for different phones, give you a way that you can reference some of that information as well. If you're just looking for a quick answer for phones, it's normally around 450 pixels, but there's a lot more to it than that. I mean, you can go deeper than that. So we'll show you where the sources of that information are and which phones have different resolutions that you might use and what those breakpoints might look like, landscape versus portrait, and when you are taking a look at a tablet or a web browser. So yeah, we'll circle back to that. All right, Travis, back over to you.
Perfect. Last thing to mention here before we get into the fun, which is actually seeing the product in action, is the Ignition Exchange. This was something we released at our conference last year in September. And this is a really important tool for the community. One where you can actually go in there, establish your account, and you can upload any Ignition resource that you've built. So whether that happens to be a full-on project or just a template or a scripting function or user-defined data type, whatever it might be, you can upload that for your own use. You can upload it privately. We can host those resources for you. You can upload it for your organization, so you can be shared amongst all people in your organization. And most importantly, you can upload it publicly so that people, you can share it with the community, and people can see, use those in their projects, and potentially enhance those resources, put them back into the community, and we can really have this huge, pool of, a library of resources that you can start with when building out your projects. And it really allows for that cross-pollination. I mean, different industries kind of post some ideas of how ways that they have built their projects, and others can really benefit from that. So we'll show the exchange off more detail. There's about almost 100, I think, public templates or resources at this point that you can pull in, and it's really exciting. We're seeing that grow every day. Okay, well, let's actually get into the fun then. I'm going to switch gears over here to my browser. So, we're going to first go through our demo project. And for those of you who don't know, we have an online demo project that you can see all the features of Perspective. So all I got to do is open my browser. So right now I'm in Chrome. I'm going to navigate over to that. So I'm going to go to a new tab, and the URL for this is demo.ia.io or demo.inductiveautomation.com. I prefer this one a little bit shorter to type in. And so here it's going to go right directly to that Perspective project. Now, one thing to note, we do have this server hosted in the cloud. It's in Amazon EC2, and it is behind a load balancer. But if I look at this and I demo.ia and I go /web home, this is typically the first screen you see when you go to an Ignition gateway. And in our particular case, we actually wanted the first thing you go to be the demo project itself. And so there's actually a new setting within Ignition 8 under the gateway settings area where you can specify what project or what URL you'd want to redirect to on the route. So if I go to the very beginning of that, where is it going to go? In our case, it's going to go to that demo project, which is bring us here to this /data perspective client and then the project name online demo. So one thing that's really important to kind of start out and note is that Perspective it's all about URLs, and you can control these URLs. And in fact, these URLs are bookmarkable, they're shareable. So when I navigate around, it can update the URL, and with the screen I'm on, I can copy the URL, give it to somebody else, and they can go in and access that same area that I was on very, very easily. And we're going to talk a lot more about security, but of course we can lock down what people are actually allowed to see here. Up here I'm on the online demo project. The way this is organized, this is a project that we built to show off various features of Perspective, and there are a couple of vertical applications, some demo projects that are kind of encompassing, if you will, in that for water, wastewater, oil and gas. There's an RFID badge application, and of course we're continuing to build some more of these. And as we build those out, we'll add more demos on this server. But let's kind of start here with some of the features and go through some of these so you can see it in action. So it starts here with real-time status control. Building HMIs is a very important part of Perspective since it's very much rooted in the operations world and with industrial. Here, where I can see on my process and I can see the status of it, I can of course go in there and do control. So here I open a pop-up, I can write back to that. So Perspective is fully bidirectional here. And this is a high performance view of this HMI. Of course, there's a more traditional using graphics. All the graphics capabilities are there. In fact, we have a library of graphics that are built in, and we're going to be continuing to expand that with some more. And you can also import any SVG or image that you want into Perspective and use that. And there's a little dashboard here at the bottom. And so as you can see, there's a URL directly to this particular screen, which is now feature real-time HMI. And if I go to somewhere else, I would change URL. Again, I can bookmark that and get right to it, come back to it later on, which is quite handy. The other big piece of this is the docking framework, which it's a little bit hard to kind of see here with this. But this is my main view is the one here where I'm seeing this HMI. But I also have a menu over here at the left, and this is a view of its own that allows us to do the navigation. And this is using the menu navigation that's in Perspective. Well, we can show some more of that. I've got a header view at the top. That's going to be, of course, showing who's logged in. Here's showing the alarms, maybe the logo or title of the application. And then there's one more dock over here on the right. Perspective has some very unique ways that we can work with docks. These are just views that we can pin to different sides of the browser. So whether it's top, left, bottom, or right, we can do that. And they could either be there all the time. I see the menu is there right now on the left, but this one on the right, I can pull out when I want to, so I can see more information about that particular view. And so our idea is kind of linked to our university and documentation within that. and or they can automatically show at different breakpoints. Kevin, there was a question that came in about the sizing there and what's the optimal for a phone, and it might very well be that when you're on a phone, you don't want the menu to be there. You want to kind of be hidden and bring it out when you want to, and that's really what this perspective is all about, is doing that mobile responsive design that's there. And so the easy way to show that is I'm actually in Chrome right now on a desktop, but imagine I was on a phone. What would it look like there? So I can actually simulate that by using the Chrome's DevTools. And I'm going to go here and make this smaller. And so when I do that, this, when I go to a smaller display, then what we're going to do is, based on how you designed it for which, container type you're using, we're going to, change it up and show that new the new way of looking at it. And so here I can see, instead of seeing the whole process, I can see the same data, but it's organized in a vertical fashion. I can still do the same control. All of that, I can see the same relevant data. It's just now more optimized for my phone. And this particular page is using a combination of different containers that we have to be able to make this all happen. As you can see, the menu on the left went away because I don't have enough real estate to keep it open all the time. But this little hamburger icon allows me to bring out that menu when I want to navigate around from one screen to another. And so every part of this application, this that we built, has this in mind. We're thinking about, when we approach perspective, what is it going to look like on a phone? What's it going to look like potentially on a tablet? What will it look like on a on a desktop? And you can actually define those breakpoints and define what this application looks like at those different breakpoints.
Yeah, and if you don't mind if I take control for a second, so you can see inside these Chrome DevTools, it has a whole variety of popular phones that are in here. You can see these viewport sizes right here, and you'll notice that these viewport sizes aren't the resolution of the phone. That's an important thing with the Retina displays and with the rest of that. The phone resolutions are a lot higher than what you see here. Basically, the phones will map pixels into their own pixels, and so the viewport sizes, this is the number of pixels that it's rendering from the web browser that it's in, and then this maps it to its own pixels inside the phone. And so the biggest viewport sizes that you see in terms of width are under about 450. So that's why I mentioned 450 before. It's normally a nice place that'll catch just about every device that you might be targeting. And if you have a specific target, you can do a phone viewport sizes. You can just Google this, and it's something that web developers use all the time, right? And so, so you get a lot of good information on this. And if we just run down, this page specifically has a whole variety of devices. You can see the native resolution is right next to this viewport size. So if you are targeting one of the phablets, right, one of the phone tablet, one of the really big ones, that might be 480 wide. But in most cases, you're targeting one of these regular phones, and those end up being 412, 360. These are Android and then the i devices. You can see what they are right here too. So yeah, this viewport size, that's the size that Ignition Perspective is going to be detecting and using for those breakpoints. And that's the detected resolution as far as perspective is concerned.
Awesome. So let me go out and close the DevTools and go back to sort of the desktop view. Again, you're going to see that come back to the way we first looked at it. But this is just some examples. So there's some HMI screen. Of course, we have the charting components where we can actually go in there and see history of information, and we can interact with those. One other important point to mention here with Perspective is that it is touch ready, and that if I'm on a phone, I can pinch and to zoom and all of that. I can pan over the data just by swiping, and it's all the components are built for that purpose, already there for us. So there's a good example of a trend. Of course, we can look at data in a tabular view. We can export data out, bring it to any format. Here you can see it's like coming to a CSV file with that. And we can upload files to this as well, so you can kind of go back and forth if you need to with that. there's looking at some alarming, there's some alarm status where I can see alarms, the current state of alarms. There's a nice alarm status table that has a lot built into it, so we can see the details of alarms and go in there, of course, and acknowledge them or shelve them, to go further with that. And then same thing for journal, so I can see history, where we can look at some KPIs, and these are just using standard bar graphs and pie charts to query data and look at those ways. And of course, there's alarm journal table to kind of go into that history in a little more detail as well. So some of the fun things that are in this demo project, along with being able to view those PDF reports from the reporting module, they're on screen, export those, download those, and kind of view any type of report that you want. We can build applications, forms where we can enter data in. That's a very common thing to do with Perspective, to input data, whether that's being sent to the PLC or whether it's put into a database. We can work with that and have validation on it. So for here, you can see I need to fill in those fields. But if I did, I can add that information in, I can interact with it. So very much this is like a database, inventory example, interfacing with a database. We can also, of course, view, bring in web services, bring those views. This is kind of an idea of a Go board where we can see news and weather here. And again, all of this be mobile responsive, so that if I'm on a phone, I can see that in an optimized way there. There's a lot of cool, fun things that are in this project, and we encourage you all to take a look at it some more. And it's also available to download. So I mentioned the Ignition Exchange. If I go over here, this is ignitionexchange.com, and with that, you can actually go and search for the demo project, and we actually have a VMware image if you want to use that, or just the regular project, so you can import into your system and see how those screens were built with that for that demo project.
If you're a warehouse plant floor, if you're somewhere that is covered by Wi-Fi so that you have connection to Ignition, but you want to scan things, you want to access the GPS, you want to geotag different entries that are happening. There are barcodes on different things. We support all sorts of different barcodes. So 2D barcodes, 3D barcodes. It's not just QR codes and code 39. It's about, 15 or 20 different barcode formats. So chances are whatever you're using, if you already have barcodes, Ignition should just be able to scan those barcodes. And then in theory, you can do a database lookup or a RESTful web service call behind the scenes and pull up information on the product or the part that was just scanned or the different item in the field that you've just gone out to. So,
and the other thing to mention, I didn't show, but there's some demo apps, specifically one that shows sort of a water wastewater example, in more detail, kind of all self-contained for that example. We can go and look at, that and drill into that. Again, mobile responsive design there as well. There's also an oil and gas one that shows the use of the map component, putting our data on top of that, and also using that for navigation as well, to navigate from one area to another. As you can see up here, again, using those URLs to our advantage. So I can go from site A to site B just by typing that in, and I'll get to that other area. And there's a cool one for the RFID badges as well, using same map, but for scanning badges, we can see the history of all those and look at what employees have scanned on this particular example. So some fun demos that are there, again, that are available to play around with, but really showcase some of those features of Perspective.
One of the nice things about the demo project is that if you have anything that you're thinking about doing inside Perspective, and you want a starting point, or you want to see how it was created, or you want a mental library of a few types of things that you can do, if you're pretty familiar with this demo project, you should be able to mentally go to, oh yeah, I saw this there, we could do this, we could pull this in from the demo project. You've got the project resources available, downloadable on our website and on the Exchange. And so all of these screens that you're seeing right here, you can dig in, you can see exactly how they were built and the different pieces. And when we built them, we tried to keep them as straightforward and simple as possible. So you're not going to see any heavy scripting behind these things. 90% of the screens are essentially drag and drop and bindings and connections and very little scripting. So we tried to make it as accessible and easy to just import these and use them inside your own project as possible.
Absolutely. All right, so I think to showcase it really, I'm gonna kind of blow through this quickly here, Kevin, so we can get to your demo as well. We have two things we
Sure.
want to show you in terms of building. What I'll do on my side is just show from getting up and running really quickly with the Perspective project, how you can build that, show a couple of the cool features that are there. And then Kevin's going to show an example of really how we can put Perspective in parallel with our existing system. So we could take the advantage of Perspective, be able to utilize it, get ROI, get value out of it right away. So I'll start here with mine. I already have an Ignition already up and running, and I had all we did ahead of time was set up a database connection. I set up some device connection with some tags, and I've got those tags configured, and I've got some information logging. I don't have any projects yet. So what we're going to do is launch the designer, and I'm going to connect to my local system. So I'm going to go in there and build a new project so we can see how we can start and how we can add on to that and deploy our project out. So I happen to be on my local machine here on my desktop, because once I get that deployed, anybody in my network can access this application. I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call this demo, and I'll use one of our project templates. So we have a few for Perspective in particular. These are also on the Exchange. There's the menu navigation and web navigation. This is the menu is the same as a demo project, but the menu is on the left-hand side. It uses that kind of vertical menu idea. But we also have a horizontal menu, which is what the web one is, where a lot of web pages have the menu at the top, and that kind of come down. You can use that style as well. The more horizontal. So we got this. I've got a project up and running, so I can see under Perspective. This is where we design. There's some views already configured in here. And it's because I started that skeleton project. So what I want to do is, rather than starting design, let's go back to the web interface, go to the home section, because if I was a user and I want to see the application, I would navigate to that project. So again, it's just a URL to get to that project, which we can bookmark. And so here I'm in. Now, it's important to note that all projects, Perspective will start out in public mode, meaning that there's no authentication needed. You get right to the application. And here I can see the information. We can certainly go in there and make it so that you have to sign in order to access the application. And so that is where the federated identity providers come into play and how this works. What I'm going to do is just go down here for Perspective, and it's already set to use my default identity provider, which is wrapping our internal provider for that. But what I'm going to do is make it not public. I'll make it authenticated. So if I do this and save it, come back here, you'll notice that the first thing I have to do is actually go and continue to sign in. It's not public anymore. So you can have a combination of some things that are public and some things that aren't, or you can make it all where you have to be authenticated, where we can then go in there and log in before I can see the application. So I kind of wanted to mention that piece. So we'll show an example of Okta in a bit here with that. So now I've got that up and running. Let's go here to our home screen. This is that where it has that the title and welcome to Perspective. What we're going to do is we're going to build some things out. So again, I already have some tags. So I'm going to take some tags and we can drag and drop them in here. And very much how we would be building in Vision, we can do the same process here in Perspective. And we have a lot of powerful components in Perspective that we can use from these kind of displays I'm looking at here for for display and for control. I can take a toggle switch on here. I can do many others, and the components are all over here on the right, and we can use any of these components onto a screen. So for example, if I want to go down here to a multi-state button, then I click on that, and every component has properties, the way for how they change, how they work, and how they behave, how they are displayed. And so for example, the multi-state has 3 states: HOA, handoff, auto. We can change those, we can add more states, and then we can link the control and indicator properties to tags. So I can link the control and the indicator. I can just drag and drop that over, and I can make this bidirectional in that binding. So now I can write back to it. Very, very easy to do so. Now, the other thing we also have is in our binding system is some really powerful things that are possible. So if I, for example, take a graphic and I take a conveyor here, or any SVG for that matter, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flatten it, and that's just going to give me one element on top. I can change the fill paint. I'm going to bind the fill paint to a tag, and I'll select the writable integer 1 tag, but we'll add a transform. These transforms allow us to manipulate that data very easily. So we can bind our properties to anything we want, and we can manipulate them by mapping it from one thing to another, applying expressions or calculations. We can format it. We can also do Python scripting. So I'm going to do a mapping from a number to a color. really show off this in an easy way. So that if the value of the tag is 0, it's gonna be red. If it's 1, it'll be green. And if it's 2, it'll be, let's say, yellow. And so now I've got that set up, and right now the value of the tag is 0, so it's red. We're good to go. And now let's save our changes and deploy it. So when I save, we're going to save that to the server. We can have hundreds of clients out there looking at data, and we can push that change out there. There's no polling in Perspective whatsoever. It's all push from the server up to the browser. And so now, of course, I can interact with it. I can turn things on or off and really work with it. The other thing that I wanted to point out here is a lot that we can be going into, but is that styling. Along with all the components, there's the ability to apply styles. And so I'm going to do that by putting a label on here. And I'll put the label saying hello world. And what we'll do is I can actually go over here and I can change, the background color of this. Let's say I want to make it red, change the foreground, all these cool things. And that's inline styling. But what I can actually do is go over here to Perspective Styles. I can define my own style. So let's call this just style. And in there, I can do whatever I want. So let's make the background here light orange. Let's make the text 24 pixels. Let's make that a blue color, and let's make it bold. And maybe I want to align it center. All these different things that we can apply to that, and we can press OK. And now over here on my label, I can simply just go in and click on style and associate that with the label. And you can see it automatically got that style. I can have multiple things to get that same style. So if I want to put a text field on here, and the text field, it's a completely different component, but I can go over here and use that same style, and now they both have it. If I go in and change the style, they'll affect both of those automatically. In fact, what I'm going to do is going to go in here and not only change it, I'm going to add animation to it. So let's add animation, and let's just do something simple and change our background from a light red here with the text being 20 pixels, going down to the text being 12 pixels, and the background being a different color. Let's go to a light green. So nothing too exciting here, but with styling, we can actually have that where we can do more than just change, just affect the background and the foreground. We can have that animation going on. We can also add styles for when we hover over it or when it's selected. Various things that allow us to, and then we can define all that in one place and apply that to multiple components. It really gives us that flexibility of working with styling. Again, we can save that, deploy that out very rapidly. And whether we're doing real-time status, whether we're going in there, adding a time series chart, which is what this one has, I can then, again, through binding, I can get data. So I can bind this to tag history, go back the last 5 minutes. Let's poll it every second here, and let's go and get, a tag realistic 0, let's say, just get one of those for now. Save that, go here to my application, go to my charts. Now I've got that real-time trend coming through. And of course, we can customize that further. We also have the alarms on here. I have an alarm configured. All that very easy to start deploying. I've got a full application ready to go at this point. So hopefully it gets you some.
Travis.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, since we're just talking about styles, we had a question that came in a while ago that specifically pertained to styles and CSS3, and specifically CSS3 files. Here's the question. As I understand it, each component or object in Perspective have a CSS3 file that contains all user settings in it, in which create by style or project position or position property of that component. Where can I find this file? If I have access to this file, I can write my own CSS3 animation commands that need multiple lines to work correctly. I know I can write my own CSS3 code in the style section, but for animations code that need multiple lines, it is not possible. So the question basically, for those of you who aren't familiar with CSS3, is basically the styles that we're showing. Is there a file on the hard drive? Is there a file somewhere that can be open to change those styles when you're applying styles to specific locations? Can you change those specific styles by editing the CSS3 directly? And over to you on all of that, Travis.
Okay, so that's a big question. I talked about styling, and I mentioned earlier we have theming and styling. Theming is an important part of this. where you can define themes. And you can actually go to the server where Ignition is installed, go to data, and go to modules, perspective, and in there you'll see the material icons, fonts, and the themes as well. There's two in there, light and dark. We haven't fully got all of our components to adhere to the theming. We're in the process of that. I think in 8.0.12 or 13 we'll have full theming ability. But these are CSS, so what theme you have loaded will be that CSS that is loaded, and this light CSS, we can go in there and we can modify this, of course, add more if we'd like to, for that. But that's where you can define your own theme you like as well, going forward. So this is where you can actually, people who know CSS can actually go in there and do that, because you're not actually defining any CSS in the designer. So that's a good question. Last thing I want to show, Kevin, then I'm going to get over to you, is the exchange here. And I want to bring in this ad hoc trend that we've got. So we can take any of these. In fact, there's a cool new COVID-19 tracking that somebody built in Perspective, which is pretty neat. But then there's this, ad hoc trends. I've got this. I'm going to download this and bring it into my downloads area. Okay, I already had it there, so I'll just replace it. And basically, I can come back to my local system, go in the configuration area, go to the Exchange. I can import this package there, ad hoc trends. Come down here and next, and I'll bring it into that same demo project. I'm going to go ahead and import. So now my designer, if I go in and I click on this update project, in a moment, we're actually going to see the ad hoc trend come in. There it is. It's now available. And so I'm going to go over here to my menu, and we're going to add a menu item. I'm going to duplicate this one. That's going to go /ad hoc. And the label will be ad hoc trend there. And I don't care about the icon at this point. So I got that new one in there, and then I'm going to go to actually add that URL for /ad hoc. And we're going to go and use the ad hoc trends screen. So now I've really added a whole new menu item to this project. So let's go over here to our demo, click on ad hoc trend, and now I've got the ad hoc trends, that new template from the Exchange in here, and I can start working with it. So I can add multiple tags in there, and I can start playing around a lot more, exporting data, changing pens and axes, and so on, using that to my advantage. So the Exchange is a great resource that we all can use with that.
Yeah, thanks for showing that off, Travis. I actually had a couple of additional questions before you pass it over to me. Is it possible to convert Vision into Perspective screens?
So I wish the answer to that was yes, but unfortunately there is no conversion utility for going from Vision to Perspective. They are two different paradigms, and we didn't want to, we want Perspective to be built from the ground up using latest technology. And so while it might be technically possible to do some of that, not 100% conversion, there just isn't a utility at this point. It's just better off looking and figuring out how you want to build that in Perspective from the ground up. Especially because there's mobile responsive design, that really changes the game and how people think about it.
Yeah, and all your tags and all your history and all your alarms and everything else inside Ignition is just there, which is worth noting. So you have different screen design for Vision and Perspective, but all the rest of the pieces, the reports, the queries, all of that is system-wide, and that's not tied to Vision or Perspective specifically. And even all of your scripts, any that don't interact with Vision specifically, you should be able to use those in Perspective and Vision just as easily. Anything in your script library can be called from both places. So you're not starting completely from scratch, but it definitely does take some work to do the visuals inside Perspective to get them, to match or get them close to what you have inside Vision, or to go through and do some improvements at the same time. Next question here is, there's one question that I'm about to address, actually, which is one of the questions, what are the settings I have to do if I want to access the application from outside the gateway network, or outside the network that Ignition is sitting on? And that is a great question. And in a few minutes, I'm going to say, hold my beer. The next question here is any recommendations for software that can save graphics into SVG format that you found would work well with Perspective? Perspective has a slightly more limited set of path support when you're pulling in those SVGs than Vision. Inkscape seems to do a decent job, although there are a few things that are missing from it. You can always use SVGs if you upload them through the image management component, though. So if you just upload them to the images and you display them on the screen, that should work for every single SVG that you have. The only thing that you don't get if you do it that way is the access to the individual paths, that if you want to drill down and do separate coloring or separate animation for a subset of inside that image, then that's where you need the drag and drop support there. And so we are working to improve that over time as well. That's something that we want to continue adding to the subset of the spec that we support inside Ignition. But yeah, Inkscape I found the most success with, but it's not 100% there. Can you add styles to the handoff auto button? Yes, absolutely. So the styles is configurable from the right-hand side there. You can set up styles for every single component. Handoff auto is no different. And you have a whole variety of options there. And the last question that's come in right now is why using Perspective over Ignition Viewer? And I think the question there is, why would someone use Perspective instead of Vision? And that's a good question. I'll start by answering it, and then I'll turn it over to you, Travis, and show some things on my screen at the same time as you expand on the answer. It depends on what you're doing. Sometimes Vision's a great option. Sometimes Perspective's a great option. Sometimes you want to use both. The way that I'm saying it, Vision isn't really going anywhere. We're maintaining Vision and we're supporting that. We're supporting Perspective. They both have really powerful sets of features. Perspective is going to give you access to the mobile device side of things, which you don't get with Vision. So Perspective does open up that whole world of devices. It does provide the access to the hardware like we were talking about earlier. And it does give you the newer device design paradigms. It also allows you to do a zero install client. So basically anyone who wants to take a look at the system, they just go to a URL and their existing web browser or their existing phone works for it, which makes deployment of clients much, much simpler as long as folks are using modern browsers and modern systems. Travis, over to you to expand on all of that, and then I'll show my screen and kind of fly through something at the same time here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a great question, right? To determine, when Perspective, when Vision. And let's just say that, Perspective really from mobility side of getting data to the business is really, I think there's no question that it's really the best option for that. And you can use that in parallel with the existing Vision you have to be able to add that value. And I think it's about looking at these two visualization platforms and understanding how you're going to get value out of them, what kind of applications you want to build, and who's your audience that's going to receive that data. And once you figure that out, then you can figure out where the effort's going to be in terms of development. So that's kind of how I think of it there. A lot of new applications are going to be going the Perspective route. And for us, we're going to be coming out with a Perspective Workstation Edition, which basically is a desktop wrapper around the browser to add in some features that Vision provided us as an application that Perspective didn't have because we're relying on the browser. So if we have the wrapper where the browser is embedded, we can then add some of those features back in, much like the native app is adding features to get access to our phone. So there's more to come with that as we go forward. We can help you make your decision, help make that decision a little bit easier.
Thanks, Travis. All right, so what I am showing off here is the basic way that you can connect up to Ignition from the outside world. So you have a plant network, you might have a corporate network, and your network topology is likely more complex than just a simple line here. But I wanted to show your couple of options and then show this off. As I only have about 5 minutes, I'm going to really fly through this, but this is one option that folks use sometimes. So they'll go VPN into the existing plant network and connect up to Ignition. Now let's say this is Vision. This could be Ignition 7.9. This could be Ignition 8, and you have a lot of Vision things on here. One option, if you want to add mobility to this, is to spin up a separate server right alongside it and have that connected either over MQTT or over the gateway network, and then have folks talk to that. This would be Perspective. In terms of licensing, this is simply a Perspective license. So you don't license everything. It's not a $10 or $20 or $30,000 software package that you're looking at right here. It's less than that. And basically, you're just adding this right next to Vision, right next to your existing set, right next to your existing tags, right next to your existing database tables, whatever it is, and then giving access to the outside. If you don't have this set up with mobile devices going over VPN, a lot of folks don't. A lot of folks have computers going over VPN, but not mobile devices. There's one other option for doing this in a secure way, which is to take this server and put it out here on the cloud. So you can have your connection out to the cloud, have this be a secured connection back and forth right here. And this could be Gateway Network or MQTT, but this can be a read-only connection right here. And from Perspective, you can make this a public server that has access from remote systems. So this is set up where Perspective is just sitting online. You have your existing system right here. And this is really relevant for a lot of folks who are doing things today, right? So, whether you're an integrator or an end user, someone who works at a factory or produces things or whatever the case might be, this can apply for anyone who has a network and has an Ignition server that already exists that you want to give access to other folks, but you might not want to give them write access. You might not want to give them access to the server itself. You might not want to set up VPN. And you might be concerned about security. You might want to make sure that there's no possible way that somebody could do a write back to anything here or get access to that server or get access to, ping this IP or any of that. So what I'm going to show here, and I'm pretty much right near the end of our time, but it's very easy for me to show it. This is my system in the office. On this system, I have an Ignition gateway. This Ignition gateway has a whole set of tags. So this is connected to a real Micrologix processor and also a simulator. And what I'm going to do is go to my gateway network. I'm going to set up an outgoing connection. I'm going to point this at an online spot. So this is a server that we just set up at secure.ia.io. And I am pointing it there over the gateway network. As soon as I point it there, it's going to set up as running. And then when I go to secure.ia.io, you're going to see that we get an incoming connection here. This incoming connection from the gateway network is going to be coming from my local system. This would be the plant system right here. And you can go through, you can set this up, you can either approve it or deny it. You can set up security for these different things, but I have this incoming connection, I have approved it here, and now this connection is in place. From this secure.ia.io, I'll come down to my tags and just set up a remote tag provider. I'll call this remote tag provider my plant. So it's going to let me browse my different tags that are down there. So I'm going to browse that. I'm going to set this up as plant. Come down here, create that tag provider, and it's now set up. And I happen to have a designer open already from the secure.ia.io.
And it's important to note while you're doing that there was no ports having open on your firewall on site. It's just simply an outbound connection.
Yeah, exactly. So nothing special to set up with the firewall. As long as you can ping that cloud server, you should be able to get to it. We have security set up on everything with this. And okay, so I just created a new project, but I actually, so I'll create one that I call demo, and I actually want to give it a project template here. And so we'll just do the menu nav right there. I could do a database. I don't even necessarily need one. And inside this project now, you'll notice that because I'm using some of these screens, I've got some similar pages to what Travis was showing earlier. This is one of our nicest templates. I really like it. So if I come over under my tags, here are my plant tags. I've got access to them. They're streaming through. And if I want to show them on the screen, I can do that very simply. So I can come in here, accumulator level, maybe that's inside a tank. I'll drag that in. There you go. And my humidity might be something that I care about. I could pull that in, show that right alongside this, and do an LED display there, and it subscribes, and then I've got my humidity. I'm just going to save this project off, and you can see if I launch this, this is my perspective session right there. And also, if you at home want to launch this, you can go right here. So this is at this URL. I'm going to, so if you go to secure.ia.io from your mobile device, you should be able to see what we have right here. I'm actually going to go to secure.ia.io and use that retarget that Travis was talking about. So inside the web server, the gateway settings actually, we have that homepage redirect. So I'm going to data perspective client demo. So this is the page that I just have set up there. And now when I go to secure IAIO, it automatically launches this. And if you've scanned that QR code, or if you've typed this in, then you're going to see that as well. This is information that is streaming from the plant, which happens to be my server that's sitting inside an office that's completely separate from the cloud server there. All services are defaulted to read-only. We have that security set up by default. So if you want to change that or you need to change it, potentially you could. But by default, that is going to be read-only access. You're not going to have read-write access to it. If you do need to change it, you can go down to your security levels. The service security, and then inside the service security, this is where it's set up for what you might want to do. So this is read-only for all of these tags, and you can change that right there. I'll pull back up that thing so you can scan that if you did want to. And we did have another question come in, which is, can Ignition 8 gateway be use a remote tag provider to an Ignition 7.9 gateway? Absolutely, yes. So that's a feature that we made sure works and works well, so you can do exactly this. This architecture is a recommended architecture for if you want to spin these up and very easily get access to that system without needing to have something that is set up that's going to be a VPN set up, without having to have separate phones set up. And of course, you can set up username and password authentication on all this. We recommend doing that. We also have a security hardening guidelines document that we recommend following anytime you're throwing something on the cloud. So I'd say just go through that, spin up a server, and you should be able to give folks access right away. I'm going to very quickly answer these last questions. When will there be a solution with a correctly working carousel component? We are improving the carousel component. It works under certain circumstances, and we know that there are some issues in other circumstances. That is under active development right now, and that might be 8.0.11. I'm not sure if you know for certain, Travis, but I've had conversations with the developers working on that, and they've made great progress, and I think that it's right around the corner.
Yeah, that's where I think as well.
Okay, great. Please reach out to us. Let us know if you want to see anything else, or if you need to understand any of this, if you want any help with architectures. We are happy to provide and accommodate, and we're really happy with the power and the ease that Perspective brings to doing things like this. If I had 2 more seconds, I'd probably set this up inside the chart as well, because all the history comes over the gateway network connection as well. There's nothing else special to set up or to connect there. I did have one more question come in, which is, do you have an ETA for basic drawing tools? We don't have an official ETA, but we have a very good design that we are pretty happy about in terms of the approach that we're looking at taking. We've had several design meetings that are around this, and it's on the high priority list. So we don't have a specific time around it, but it's definitely something that is really shortly on the development queue going forward.
Thanks everybody for attending here today. Hopefully, you got a lot out of today's session. Please, as Kevin said, reach out to us if you have any questions.
Next week actually is going to be one with Grantech, but we'll be talking a little bit about modernizing the plants and implementation, and Grantech has a lot of really good experience when it comes to that. It should be a really interesting session. They've agreed to share some of their insight into all sorts of things that they're doing right now, and we should have a pretty good chat. And then, yeah, we're going to have a variety of other customers and end users and integrators who are on, and we're excited to see this continue.
Absolutely, and all the recordings will be on the website, afterwards. And we thank you all again for attending here today. I look forward to seeing you next time. You have a great rest of your day and stay safe out there. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.